Hey, what's up, everyone? This is episode 129 of Shatter the Vain. I'm Brad Chmielewski, and we got a fun episode this time. A little different. A lot of the times I end up putting out a patch episode where I run down all the changes and just all the balance tweaks and items and new skins and replay system and all that stuff that maybe have been put into the patch in between episodes, but didn't get to it, so it kind of saved it and pushed it back until this episode. So on this episode, though, it's not a full patch rundown, but I have FooJee joining me. We talk about the changes in the patch, but we also talk about what it means for Worlds. Coming up on December 2nd through the 4th. So it's really cool because he's on the analyst desk and he has a good insight into maybe what the pro players are playing, as well as what he's seeing and talking about behind that desk. It's a really cool opportunity to chat with them about what we may be seeing with the introduction of Flicker and some of the nerfs and buffs to other heroes like Gwen and things like that. So who's gonna reign supreme here coming up at Worlds? What are gonna be the top picks, top bans? So we dive into that in this episode. Before we get into that, I want to mention the Patreon page. That's over at patreon.com/shatterthevain. If you can donate to the show, awesome. I'm coming up on 2 years of doing the podcast. So it's really exciting, very fun to have been talking about this game for so long. So many changes and exciting stuff has happened over the last 2 years of this game, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the next year, 2 years, moving forward with the show and the game. So check that out. Let's do it. Let's jump into episode 129.
Shatter the Vain.
This is the 129th episode of Shatter the Vain. My name is Brad Chmielewski, and this is a podcast all about Vainglory. Every episode, I break down the news, gameplay, game tips, and hopefully we can all become better players together. And every week, bring on new people from the community, people that love this game. And this week, I have FooJee joining me. Welcome.
What's up? What's up?
I feel like you don't really need an introduction. If people have been playing Vainglory, they know who you are, but maybe you should let them know. Just a quick one, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I'm FooJee, or my real name is Ben Wadley. I've been in the Vainglory community since December of 2014. Used to be a professional player. Recently retired doing analytical work for SCMC and Twitch, and I do still currently have co-ownership in GankStars.
Right.
So yeah, that's the TLDR, I suppose.
Okay, cool. So how's that switch been from playing in the competitive scene and on a team to analyzing everyone who's playing?
It's been pretty fun. I definitely feel like I know quite a bit more about the game now than I did before. As one might imagine, you get like, as an analyst, you're constantly watching videos of multiple regions, all different types of teams from all over the world and different players, and you get to see the kind of bird's eye view strategy of what people are doing. So I think it allows me to set the bar pretty high from what I expect from competitive.
Okay.
But at the same time, also being a player, understanding the pressures of what happens when you're in a competitive game in a tournament and kind of everything's on the line. Like I can understand mistakes. I kind of see what players are going through and some of the decision qualities that may suffer. I have a pretty good understanding of like where that comes from. So I think it gives me a good balance of understanding what should be happening versus maybe why something is happening and kind of relaying that to the audience whenever possible.
Yeah, I felt like when you came aboard to get on the desk, it was like you brought another perspective to it where it is hard for other analysts like Humanists or any of the other people that haven't played and known the stress level of that, and you kind of just have a little more insight into it. So it's kind of a nice take on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, to be transparent, like most of the casters are really bad at actually playing Vainglory.
Oh, damn. Okay.
So and some of that's just the nature of them not, putting a ton of time into it. Some casters have multiple games they cover, so I mean, I understand that, but like,
Right.
yeah, I think you have to be kind of careful about how harsh, you come across. But you still be honest, still be truthful. Don't like pander or baby to people that are sensitive and they're like, well, I didn't really mean to make these mistakes or whatever. I mean, if it's the or Evil 8, it's a tournament game, it's a world championship. Like, this is supposed to be the highest, most competitive environment you play in, so you expect teams to show up with that kind of caliber. But you find very like you find genuine ways to convey it, hopefully, in both strategy and fact, with a little bit of opinion, but hopefully it's guided correctly.
Have you seen since starting playing Vainglory and the competitive scene, have you seen the players taking it more serious than maybe it was in the beginning, where it was just this mobile game that we played in our bedrooms?
I definitely do. I'm not sure it's definitely taken more seriously by players that are in kind of the upper echelons of competitive. But
Okay.
I think some of the lower Evil 8 teams in Challenger, it's still very much not taken seriously. Not in the essence that I don't think people are trying to win, but just the amount of time and commitment people are actually putting towards bettering themselves is still kind of not there. And it's really just because there really isn't a lasting structure that guarantees anyone hours and hours of time invested will lead you to somewhere you can, be excited about. Like, you just don't know as a player if all of this work's going to pay off. And there's only a few teams in the world right now where you might argue that it has, right? Like TSM, obviously, a big example like that. But even even GankStars, Cloud9, you have G2 Esports, Mouse Sports, Phoenix, Armada. Like, they're all good organizations with good players and good teams. But 3 months from now, you don't know where anyone's going to be. And that's kind of a tough place, I think, for players to truly feel like they need to commit, they want to commit, or that they have the maturity, because the player base is very young, to actually commit to themselves. The time involved. So,
Do you think that is it the game, or is it just them not knowing like what they're gonna do?
it's a combination. I mean, it's the game inherently brings a younger crowd, so you automatically have an average age that's much lower than that of a traditional esport specifically. So, yeah, I mean, these kids would be more concerned probably about their ELO going up and down during the week than actually setting up scrimmages to get better for, tournament play during the weekend, right? So
Yeah.
that's just kind of the nature of, I think, some of the age. But then the other side of the coin is that because the esport is still so new and Vainglory is still new, and there's not a lot of organizations taking charge in a big way in terms of like long-term commitment, you can't really expect a lot of these younger kids to put things on pause, like school maybe, or extracurricular activities or whatnot. Like, they have to choose it, and it's a big risk for them. So I definitely don't blame the lack of commitment from some of the younger students, or not students, kids, but
Right. And if you're a parent, like, they probably should, this might not work out. I'm sure their parents play a big role in that too, for some people.
I mean, it looks pretty good when you like go to your parent and you say, like, if you're really one of the skilled players in the scene, you can talk to them about prize pools and all of this great stuff. And I think it's good from a parent's perspective. This might be a good part-time job or but going full-time, Vainglory, I still think has a bit of a way to go before you can convince most parents of kids that are not already, of the age of 18 or older, that you should invest your kids' time into this esport, because it could be something bigger for them in the future.
I think TSM now, with their house, they have maybe gave a little more fuel to some of those people to, like, look at these guys. They're working at a location, kind of. They're playing, and they're succeeding. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a good start, but at the same time, they're one of the few that can actually pull it off, right? Like
Yeah.
TSM, Cloud9, some of these external organizations that make all of their income, all of their notoriety from other esport titles. Vainglory is kind of a free venture for them, and they can put as much or as little money as they want to into it. So I definitely think parents and even, players making decisions for themselves need to be careful about basing decisions based on how fast something may move or not move. Because just remember, like 1 year ago, so it's been a year since esports officially kind of kicked off for Vainglory, and
Sure,
we
yeah.
started our first competitive season. And even back then, you had players traveling to Korea for leagues. And it's exciting and it looks promising. But a year later from where we were, there still really isn't any longevity support for a player in the scene.
Right.
So
Okay.
if people made a bunch of decisions a year ago to like skip college and dive deep into Vainglory and hope it all worked out, I'd say at this point it really hasn't paid off for anybody. Worlds will definitely be a big tell on how successful Vainglory will be over the next year, I think.
For sure. And yeah, the Worlds is coming up December 2nd through the 4th, and we got the new patch, and that's kind of what I wanted to have you on to talk about the patch and like predictions and thoughts of things we may see at Worlds going into it. So if you wanted, should we jump into these changes and talk about Worlds a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
Vainglory News.
So I think the biggest thing is when a new hero comes into the update, and that's always exciting for I think all the players, and I'm sure a headache for all the competitive players because now they have to learn someone new. But Flicker is getting some bans in the higher elos, but still just not very useful in the lower tiers right now. But let's go over the abilities, and then we can talk about maybe how Flicker is going to affect the game a little bit. So the first, the heroic perk is called Will-O-Wisper. Flicker gains stealth and move speed bonus when in a bush for a short duration. This is similar to Cruel's movement speed a little bit, except Flicker gets the stealth. The A ability is called Binding Light. Flicker commands his fairies to swarm a target location, dealing damage to enemies standing in it. When the effect expires, fairies root any enemy still within the area. So that's kind of your root, your stun, your CC there. The B is called Fairy Dust. Flicker swirls fairy dust around him, slowing and dealing damage to anyone inside the dusted area. After a short duration, the dust ignites, dealing a burst of damage. Cool. And then the ultimate is Moon Cloak. This is where Flicker and his allies temporarily gain stealth and movement speed. The stealth will break when any hero uses an ability, attacks, or takes damage. And this ability right here, this ultimate, is where teams that work together will succeed, and solo queue players this is worthless.
Yeah, hard to pull off a successful ultimate, I think, sometimes.
So it's been about a few days, not quite a week since Flicker's been released. Have you been playing him at all? Have you tried him out? Have you seen him?
So I personally have not played Flicker yet, but I have played with and against him a lot in the kind of upper tiers of Vainglory, and he's very popular right now. He's basically pick ban status already. So people are either getting rid of him or certainly he hasn't slipped through one draft that I can think of since I've been playing since the patch launched, which is quite a few games. Yeah, he's good. I mean, like he does way better when you have teams that understand, I think, Vainglory to a bit more of a complex level, even if it isn't like a bunch of people on voice coordinating around his ultimate and stuff like that. If you just have a pretty good understanding of how to execute in this game, you can make him work. And you see a lot of high skill players, pulling him out in duo and team queue as well, and kind of putting the paint on. Like he's definitely annoying to deal with because he requires a superfluous amount of vision, one might think, because it's like even when he isn't level 6, he moves very quickly through the map. It's very easy for him to clear out scout traps and vision that have been placed down before a contraption comes online from the enemy team. So
Correct. Yeah.
he's very good at getting rid of vision. He's very good at sneaking up on people and planting vision in other places when they're not looking. And then he's an annoying hero to play against. I definitely think so.
In the games I've been playing in like POA bronze area, he's not seen that often. There's some cases where he does pop up, but I think his Binding Light, his A, is very hard to land unless you start to understand how long it takes, and you're starting to get people to slow with the fairy dust, kind of initiate with that, and then Binding Light. Like learning the combos is very tricky with him starting out.
Yeah, like the key to being successful with Flicker is understanding when to use your passive and when to engage. Binding Light itself is more of, I would say, kind of a directional ability to keep people from going in certain areas that you would maybe not want them to retreat in. So if somebody's running away, putting it in front of them for them to actually like attempt to avoid it. It's very difficult to like land it on someone and for it to spend its full duration and actually root them. But I think it's very good for cutting off some escape paths that somebody might attempt to go down and, force them in an easier direction for your allies to follow up on. But the bread and butter for Flicker is his B ability. His B ability is crazy good, and it's insanely good countering a lot of heroes that you might normally think can kind of get in and get out of the fight, like Taka, for example. I personally think Flicker is a good Flicker player can really make Taka's life miserable, because when Taka goes in, if he doesn't know Flicker is there and Flicker pops his fairy dust ability, then Taka now has to use an ability to either escape or hope that maybe he kills his target, because he cannot get out of it. Like, you can't use Kaku and move fast enough out of the ability. Its slow is so robust that it really holds you down, and characters like Taka struggle with that, right? But it works for pretty much anybody, especially if he sneaks up as a gank out of a bush and you just don't know he's there. If he's on top of you and he pops his B ability, it's pretty much game over if his team's on the same page, because you can't get out of it. Like, it's really difficult. Right,
and I've been seeing some Flickers building Shiver Steel, so you have like the double slow on you then, especially in the early game. You're never gonna get away.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, and if you have really good roams on this pick, I've seen some roamers do some really creative things already, where you can engage on someone, or maybe you're chasing someone through the jungle trying to get the kill or trying to still farm, and Flicker is patient. He waits in the bush, he gets stealth, he goes behind the team that's invading and maybe grabs the carry, so you can kind of engage on them at like another angle. It's just It requires you to invest in so much vision early and mid game if you're the other Roman jungler, if you really don't want him to speed up. But that's the benefit, right? Like, if you shut him down early, he's really bad at getting a team that's behind back on par or ahead. Like, he doesn't really offer a lot to teams that are not succeeding. But if you're ahead, he's like right now one of the ultimate shutdown roams that just keeps you behind because you can't deal with him.
Yeah. So because of that, you think you're already seeing a band. Like, is he going to be one of those top picks then at Worlds?
Yeah. Definitely. Especially once you combine like competitive teams with voice and the ability to use his ultimate in creative ways, because his ultimate, like, it's important to note that it's global, so you can help allies escape far away. You can help an ally who's trying to gank or trying to get out of a situation or maybe steal some farm, can actually call for you to activate the ultimate so they can bypass some people to get into a better position. You can activate it to help someone steal Kraken. You can activate it to triple gank someone in the lane if you know there's like no scouts, and the speed boost is pretty notable. It's not just a tiny one. Like, you actually feel it. You move very quickly as well when you're going through this. So coordinated teams, I think he's going to be even better, which is kind of scary to think about, to be honest.
When I noticed it was all like global, I was in a game and I wasn't even near him. I was like, oh, I didn't even, because of the patch notes don't even say that. and that it's a global ability. So it's kind of I was just like, oh, I'm not even by him. What's happening that I wasn't paying attention to?
Seems like something they should have put in the words. Like, obviously, if it doesn't list a range, maybe the assumption is that it's global, but I feel like it's pretty important just to notate that, like, this ability is global. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's pretty cool. Because sometimes, like, a Flicker might use it and you don't realize he's going to use it, and you're halfway across the map, and as soon as you go stealth, you auto attack something, and then, they catch up to you and die when you could have used it perhaps to escape or or whatnot. So
Yeah.
I think voice coordination with Flicker is makes him even better than he already is currently.
So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see if he is banned out most of the time, just for the fact people don't want to deal with him. Like that's probably what's gonna happen. Just like because you spend a lot of money, like you're saying. So
Yeah, I think you definitely have to get contraption, or else you overinvest into constantly buying scouts and flares in order to keep Flicker from making plays. He's not
Yeah.
going to fit every team's play style. He is a kind of a more unique approach to kind of team coordination. But yeah, I think he will be very popular for sure.
any counters that you're seeing to him so far? It seems like Catherine's always a good pick because contraption works so well on her with the cooldown and just being able to pop your bubble to kind of look for him, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think so. He doesn't do incredibly well against heroes that can outrange him. So when you think of things like Kestrel and Sky, any kind of hero that has a lot of damage that can do it from a pretty good distance, or any kind of like high mobility ranged hero, even like a Celeste or something, these are all very good against Flicker. But Flicker in general he's not particularly good into any one person by himself. He's not like a Lance, let's say, who can oftentimes make some pretty crazy plays, and even Arden or somebody who can, or even Catherine sometimes, right, can actually do some pretty good work on their own. Flicker can do this if he's ahead, but if he's a little behind or if he's on par and he runs into a glaive or any kind of enemy on the team, he's going to be in trouble. But if an ally is there with him, he empowers the ally to do so much work because of the slow field from Fairy Dust. It just keeps everyone locked in, so you get a lot of free damage off, a lot of free ability to reposition yourself. And Flicker just, he absorbs a lot of that damage.
Nice.
But like I said, if it's like a Kestrel or something on the other side, it's very different because Flicker can't usually get to Kestrel with his Fairy Dust ability before she chunks him down, a bunch of times. So not the best frontliner. He's kind of like a fortress in the essence that you kind of want someone to be there with you when you go in to kind of help with that crowd control and help kind of diversify the damage output. But,
Makes sense, yeah. Well, then, like, moving down in the notes and the changes here, you mentioned Kestrel. Kestrel was a crazy overpowered force in 1.23, and she got a little bit of tweaks in 1.24 where the hotfix that happened kind of went through. Her crystal ratio was brought down just a little bit, the damage. And then her active camo, that had a slight change with a cooldown reduction from the primary impact of Glimmer Shot. That was down from 2 to 1.5. That was in the hotfix as well. So I've still been seeing Kestrel getting banned out most of the time because, again, she can just snowball games still.
Yeah, she's still really good. I mean, Vainglory as a game has released some heroes in the past that have just been absolutely insane, like out of the gates, and they're like nerfing them over and over again to a point to where they're still competitive picks. But like Kestrel, she's still good. She it may take an extra Glimmer Shot like to actually kill you instead of just like 2 like it did when she was released. But
Yeah.
she's still very strong in the essence that her range is really long on Glimmer Shot. She does a ton of damage for free throughout a lot of the game, and if you're trying to walk up to her and do damage to her, you're gonna get chunked out pretty heavily, even with these nerfs. The thing that the nerfs help is she's not really the 1v3 Kestrel she was a couple of patches ago, when you would
Okay.
just like build double auto attack items like Breaking Point and Bonesaw, and just auto attack and constantly hit active camo over and over and over again and kill everybody, which is kind of what she was doing before. Now she definitely can take out some targets really well, but she's much easier to shut down if you actually get to her, because she does rely pretty well on these glimmer shots to land, especially if she wants to reset her active camo ability. So
But yeah,
still a good pick, still
yeah,
popular.
I'm always shocked that when I can pick someone off with a glimmer shot, it's like, whoa, that should not have hit them. I'm just like,
You see a lot of people now even doing these. They'll buy like weapon power in the jungle, but they'll pick up a crystal bit or something just to get splash damage at the edge of the range, because you do tend to want to fire at max distance to get the weapon power and the crystal off. But if you're just a little too far away and picking up the kill, the crystal splash damage will actually help seal that for you. So some different kind of hybrid early builds, but 99.9% of Kestrels finish out with Sorrowblade and Monocles these days, or maybe a Breaking Point as well.
right, yeah. Moving down, Blackfeather, he was pretty strong last update. He got just a nerf to his barrier health, was down from 15 to 10%, and I haven't seen him as much. I think people are still digging him, but I think this was just enough to make him not as tanky and the front line that he had become.
Yeah, I mean the 5% is noticeable.
Yeah.
I still think Blackfeather is not a pick any situation. Like he fits into specific comp styles and he fits well into certain counters, but with the popularity of Celeste, and Blackfeather's typically not being in lane, he actually ends up doing sometimes not very well against those comps, because you have like heroes like Lance and stuff that knock him around and reposition him. So it's very hard for him sometimes to stick to a carry like Celeste or Scarf, which is where he notably used to be the strongest. It was like you saw Celeste, you would just pick Blackfeather insta-lock almost because it was like, you could just kill her all the time, but it doesn't really work that way anymore. So still really good, but yeah, the nerf definitely didn't help him.
And then Taka had a cooldown to the invisibility, right? Is that the House of Kuma?
Well, it was his perk
Oh, his
was
the perk was
25% cooldown to 20% cooldown. So
Okay.
he gets a little less cooldown percentage on his abilities once he's at max stacks.
Okay. It's
Or
still,
per stack. I mean,
yeah, you're not seeing as many Takas, but that new skin kind of brought him back to the foreground for everyone. They just want to show that off if they have that.
no, it's true. I mean, Taka's a skill like hero. Like there are people that are insanely good on Taka and can make him work in a lot of situations, and then there are people that are just really not good at him. But he's very much empowered right now, I think, by this Stormguard banner and Stormcrown build. Whether you go crystal or weapon, I think it actually makes Taka much stronger than he would be without the item right now. But
For sure. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the item maybe at the end because it's kind of silly right now, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there was Lance is gonna get nerfed again, but he got nerfed this time where his base armor is down a little bit, his base shield is down, and the Githian wall, the crystal ratio, the passive damage was reduced just by 0.05%, so hardly anything there. Lance is someone I think I'm banning out most games if my team isn't first pick, because the damage he can output, I'm shocked when he hits me for like 581 damage on an impale. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean the nerfs make him like easier to kill, but he still does what he needs to do. So he's not gonna move anywhere, I don't imagine, in the meta. He's still really strong.
And then Lyra actually got a pretty big nerf, but I think she's still getting played quite a bit. Her slow got changed from 80% DK to a flat 20%, so that's pretty significant. And the ability now only slows while the target is within the Bright Bulwark. Oh, so that's just the Bright Bulwark, sorry. Yeah. So it's still 80% to 20% is kind of a big deal.
It is, especially when you used to be able to catch people on the edge with the 80% slow versus them being like right in the middle. Lyra's still pretty good though. Like, I mean, this the slow, once again, this is kind of like the Kestrel change, right? It's not making them bad. It's just making them a more fairly balanced hero, because sometimes these abilities and the number tuning is just really oppressive, and they're meta not just because they're good, but because they have to be. Because you just can't not pick up something that's insanely good. Which is kind of Lyra. I'd actually hope to maybe even see some Lyra lane make a bit of a reappearance, because as the meta changes, sometimes having, like heroes will find themselves back into other positions simply just because of those meta flexes. And I think like someone like Kestrel, some of these like immobile long range heroes, Lyra actually excels at pretty well, doing tons of damage to them at such a long distance with like a really tanky jungle that can kind of go in and follow up. So
yeah,
interesting to see maybe if some people might flex her back out of the roam position, especially with this specific nerf, because she doesn't do as much now as she used to throughout the early game, but she's still very strong in other ways.
Mm-hmm. And with Flicker being here, the Bright Bulwark is a great ability to kind of shut him down a little bit too if he gets on top of you. So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his B ability is just a much like better. It's like they kind of removed her slow and gave it all to Flick.
Okay,
what it feels like.
That's true. And then Cruel got a little bit of a buff. Eddie Andres was talking on the dev stream that this is nothing. It's 0.5% crystal ratio on his weakness stacks. And then the lifesteal added 0.5 as well. And he was kind of making the case for like 0.5 is nothing on Cruel. Like this is just a weird little tweak that maybe was just something they're trying to play with on Cruel to see where he can kind of just slowly raise him up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. Like the crystal ratio specifically affects the duration, I guess, in which the stacks stay on the target, which is kind of a little unique. I mean, I guess there are times where Cruel sometimes he gets punted around and his stacks fall off, and if that happens, you feel pretty bad, right? Because it takes a long time to get him back up.
For sure.
But the lifesteal per stack change, I think, matters more throughout the leveling process rather than the late game potential for Cruel, because his late game, you're right, is only a 0.5% increase, but the lifesteal per stack is a 1.5 increase before you hit the max like overdrive, right? So that's a pretty big deal. 1.5, and once again, that's per stack.
Yeah.
So that adds up for sure.
Yeah. So I don't think we didn't really see any Cruel, I think, in most of the Evil 8, maybe like once or twice, but he hasn't been the hero. And I think again with Flicker, like I don't think he's going to do well into someone like Flicker if Flicker gets through.
No, but I think Flicker plus Kroll would be nightmarish. So there's something to be said about how well those two can work together, because you're not getting away from a Flicker and a Kroll. Like there's just not going to happen. Like the slows are insane, and if they alternate the Kroll slow and then Flicker pops his B ability, like yeah, I mean I like the synergy there, but I do think Flicker would be really good at keeping Kroll from getting two targets, and Kroll sticking the Flicker with an Atlas is not ideal. So it's interesting. He's like a pretty, I think, kind of hard counter to Kroll. At the same time, he can partner up with Kroll and do some work.
Yeah,
so.
Sure. And then Glaive got a little bit of tweak. He's a little tankier now. His armor and shield got increased, and then his Bloodsong, his lifesteal per stack went from 0.9 to 1%. And I've actually been playing a few games with Roam Cruel because of this increased armor and shield up, and it kind of makes him pretty annoying, especially with Stormcrown Banner.
You mean Roan Glaive?
Oh, Rome Glaive. Yeah, sorry, Rome
Yeah.
Glaive. Yeah, Rome
Okay.
Glaive.
Just checking. So
Yeah.
Glaive's tankiness actually is pretty cool because you can now invest into more like bursty elements of damage without having to worry about getting items to survive as early.
Right.
And especially in the late game, like you now have a lot more survivability, which he definitely needed. It was really easy just to kind of chunk him out. So these are pretty big changes for Glaive. I definitely think, once again, Glaive is still very situational, but you might actually see him now, whereas before you would just pretty much never see him.
And I still think in solo queue he's a great pickup because he can change the outcome in a lot of the fights.
Oh yeah, and he can put the enemy laner behind like pretty well too, because like lane ganks from Glaive are, unless your team's constantly pinging out or keeping an eye on him for you as the laner, it's really easy to do like the boots out of the bush and punt someone back, and picking up 3 or 4 lane kills in a solo queue match puts that laner behind by probably 30 to 40 CS over the course of the game, which can be really good for that win.
Yeah. So yeah, see how he's feeling this time, and then Fortress he's got a little bit of change. His pack mates, his ultimate, this perk now grants 0.7 or 1.7 move speed, change from 1.6 to 1.8 based on what boots he has bought. So that's kind of an interesting tweak to, depending on the items you're gonna get, your pack mates will be a little faster. But it was changed from that, so now it's just flat. Sorry.
It's just like when your ally used to get next to you, like it was your speed boost changed based upon your boot purchase, which is, I guess, kind of weird, like they said. But now it's just a flat 1.7 regardless. So whenever you pick up your increased movement speed from being next to your ally, it's just 1.7, which is nice. It's a bit of an early game buff, a bit of a late game nerf perhaps, but if 1.8's tier 3 based, it actually might not be a late game nerf because most people on roams don't finish a tier 3 unless it's war treads, and at that point, like, who cares? Because treads. So
you're usually buying them for the stats on the health and to just help your carries kill somebody, not so much you getting in there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Gwen got a little bit of a buff, which I'm excited to see because I wanted to love Gwen in 1.23, and I've heard people say she was good, and I could never get her to work that well. But now in 1.24, her range was increased, and that was a huge downfall to her lane game. Her weapon damage was up, and then her weapon ratio on her boomstick got increased a little bit, and then her buckshot bonanza, that got increased a little bit on the weapon ratio. So Crystal Gwen was getting played a little bit because she was a better option in 1.23, but now I think weapon with this range and extra damage, you're noticing it.
Yeah, I mean, these are actually in like humongous buffs that just across the board for some. First of all, a range buff is kind of one of the craziest buffs you can get in any MOBA, because there's nothing across Vainglory or any other MOBA, anything that increases your ability to do damage at a further distance away just doesn't really exist a lot of times in items and stuff like that. And sometimes people get it through level scaling as part of their kit, but just a flat base range upgrade is crazy. That's a huge buff, not to mention all of her weapon ratio buffs as well. So I definitely think this makes Gwen a competitive pick. She still can get shut down from time to time, but the person that used to shut her down before, that was like Ringo, actually is worse because of all the buffs that Gwen got. So now Ringo, in my opinion, is not even that great of a pick into Gwen because of how much damage she does. Like, she does tons of damage with autos, but she also has all these abilities that do tons of weapon damage that Ringo just doesn't have. So before, he used to kind of be the bully counter pick, and now Gwen seems to not really have that. So interesting. We'll have to see how popular she actually is, because I still think she isn't just pick whenever, but she does really well into certain melee comps, and she can really make someone like a Kroll or a Glaive struggle. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, with her B to like just kind of remove that CC and get out of there is always a nice thing. But yeah, being able to slow people too who dive you maybe under turret, things like that. Like, She's fun to play. I do enjoy playing her.
Yeah, her kit is her kit is pretty crazy. Like on paper, I mean, she has essentially a cleanse or built-in reflex block to some extent. Like a stun on her ultimate was pretty good damage. A humongous cone of slow as well from her A ability, and not to mention just the flat damage she gets from her perk. That really kind of, once you have an infusion and a breaking point, like it's way better than Ringo, because Ringo actually has to kill something to get the guaranteed crit. She just
Right.
gets a huge amount of increased damage from just not attacking, which is, not bad. So.
No. And then, you mentioned Ringo. He got his movement speed changed a little bit on his Twirling Silver. It's now up from 0.75 to 1 at the max level if you overdrive it. And then his Hellfire Brew, his cooldown was reduced a little bit across the board. So that definitely helps those crystal Ringos out there.
Yeah, Ringo used to be my favorite hero a long time ago, but Ringo just makes me sad. Like, I don't think Vainglory knows what they want to do with him. Like, he was kind of their staple balance hero that they never changed. And now that they've found all these kind of new characters with different abilities coming in, Ringo's kit feels kind of lackluster. It doesn't really synergize well with each other either. Like, I think his Hellfire Brew is really odd. It seemed kind of like we have this weapon power carry, but since we want a lot of our heroes to also be able to play multiple paths, we'll give him a crystal power based ultimate.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if you play Ringo weapon power, if you use Hellfire Brew, Twirling Silver, and Achilles Shot, you're almost completely out of mana. Like, you can't do that as a weapon power Ringo because you have to have multiple Twirling Silvers in order to stay relevant. So I definitely think the movement speed change is cool. The Hellfire Brew reduction to me is just whatever. I don't feel like that's going to play much of a difference at all.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I still think Ringo's you're not gonna see him very much. Like, this doesn't fix where his issues are.
Right.
So.
But they need someone that's just a point and click person for new players to get into too. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
a
I
tough
think
thing.
Ringo can still, like, they can work with that, but they need to adjust things like his energy consumption. Like, they can change some other things with him that don't change his play style, so they can still consider him more of like an entry basic hero, but actually make him effective at higher levels of play that don't change the way he plays, I guess is what I'm saying. They just seem to kind of be avoiding those changes for now.
Yeah. And then there was Ozo. I know Humanist was pretty excited to see some of these changes. His 3-ring circus, heal per hit, the crystal ratio was changed from 25% cooldown reduction to 15%. His acro bounce, the speed boost after the last bounce now has a weapon ratio. That's kind of interesting. The speed boost duration after the last bounce now has a does that read twice? Duration after the last bounce.
No, it's
snaps.
two different things.
Okay.
Yeah, it is kind of confusing the way it comes across, but yeah, it's two different things.
And then Ozo now gains more fortified health when he jumps into these fights after before the takeoff bounce. So that's kind of nice. So it gives him a little more tankiness, and he does a little more damage when he jumps in, because that was always the problem with acro bounce. You're using it to go in, but if you get stopped, you are dead.
Yeah, no, this is true. I mean, Ozo's the main issue with Ozo is just his damage is very unreliable, because acro bounce is very difficult to execute every time that you want to, especially once you start it. You can't really like back out of it that easily. So if there's a Cath or anyone that kind of stuns you or locks you down, you can get into some trouble. I do think the fortified health helps him survive some of those like moments where he kind of went to bounce into a terrible spot. And the weapon ratio is pretty interesting. Like, it gives him a longer speed boost, and it increases how fast the boost actually is depending on how much weapon ratio you have. So pretty unique changes there. I still think he's very much a niche pick in competitive play.
Yeah.
He's actually not the easiest to pull off in solo queue either, because a lot of times when you go in really deep. So you kind of want a team to be like ready And if you start acro bouncing and they're not on the same page, kind of end up halfway across the map and not maybe in the best scenario for yourself.
Yeah, I did see him in one game where he was with Adagio, and that was dangerous because he could just jump in under turret and someone was dead instantly.
Adagios, Ardens, Lyras, those are three very specific heroes that work very well with Ozo. And then like you can even, uniquely pick up the Protector contract, which, gives him even more shielding because of his heroic perks. So I definitely think he's very good in very certain situations. I'd be surprised if we didn't see him at all at Worlds, but he's only going to come out like during specific draft scenarios where the enemy team doesn't have a lot of lockdown or the ability to push him off of targets.
Mm-hmm. And then there was Baron. He just had a bug fix where the slow on his Porcupine Mortar wasn't getting applied. Now, I don't really think we saw Baron at all in Evil 8. Maybe one or two games.
During the second portion, yeah, he was really popular during the first
split
half. Yeah, first split. It's the biggest issue with Baron is he does insane damage. He has insane attack range. Like he can really do some work, but he takes so long to get there. Like you have to almost stall a game for 15 minutes.
Right.
Baron comes online when he gets a Sorrow Blade, a Breaking Point, and a Tyrant's Monocle. That's 3 tier 3 items. And once that happens, he's just does so much damage. It's pretty insane to watch and actually pretty fun. But getting there requires your team to play really carefully and really well, because you can't really drop down and help them out as much as you would like. He's super slow. His mobility is bad until he gets a lot of weapon power. So a lot of competitive teams just don't pick him up because there's better picks that are honestly just as strong late game, but have way stronger early and mid games as well.
Yeah, hopefully get some sort of tweak down the line, because I do enjoy playing him, but yeah, it's just like I feel slower than Saw feels. It's just like I'm never gonna make it
you
there.
Are.
Yeah.
He actually has he's the slowest base movement speed in the game.
Oh, slower than Finn too? Damn.
Yeah, he's slower than Finn as well.
That's sad. He needs to upgrade his mech.
He's barely moving. I know, right? His mech's a little rusty.
And then the last hero that got changed was Celeste, who was pretty popular pick there towards the end of 1.23. Her Heliogenesis, they got changed a little bit. The damage across the board on the impact damage was reduced, and the minion damage was also reduced just a little bit on the crystal ratio. And then early on it was reduced. So this kind of made her fall off a little bit, but I've seen Scarf kind of replace her a little bit in solo queue.
Yeah, Scarf is really good. It's the main reason why you see usually more Celeste than Scarf is because Celeste's skill shots are easier to hit. Like the Helio is easier to hit usually than Spitfire. And in the zone control and the vision you get from it are also pretty high. I think a lot of people just play Celeste more too, so you don't have as many practice Scarf players.
Okay.
This is a nerf. I mean, hands down. You're still gonna see her though. Like it's once again, it's back to the kind of Kestrel conversation. You go from someone who's just really, 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 really good to someone who's just one really less good, right? They're still going to show up. They're still going to be there. They're still going to do a ton of damage in the late game if they're played by the right people. It's just she's not as overbearing throughout the early game and mid game as she was before, which was pretty needed because having someone who literally scales at all aspects of the game is kind of bad. Like you need a trade-off at some point. Celeste just didn't. They've been buffing Celeste forever. She fell super hard out of the meta. They've been giving her little tiny buffs for month after month after month, and then eventually people picked her up and started crushing with her. So now they're having to tone her back a little bit.
Yeah. So do you think this patch changes a lot going into Worlds? Do you think it makes a big impact, or is it like a small enough adjustment with the new hero that things kind of stay the same and doesn't affect what people have been playing or practicing?
I don't know how much this patch is affecting people in ranked queue per se, but it definitely is changing the meta a lot for Worlds.
Okay.
in the essence that you're not gonna really have an answer to that yet, depending on exactly, because what happens is let's say like Flicker, like so Flicker's kind of a priority, right? So what that does is means you have a lot of teams that are going to be figuring out what works well with Flicker, what works well against him, but because he's also very much a ban priority, that now means you have other heroes that are open that used to always be banned. So you're gonna like there's always a trade-off when you go into a new patch. If a new hero comes out and that hero is good, then that means that there used to be a hero that was good that was always banned that now won't be, and that hero will be available more often in competitive play.
Okay.
Or the new hero takes that priority, and you now have entirely different compositions coming out of like the teams that are actually playing Flicker. So it's kind of exciting. It's interesting to see where we'll be. I mean, obviously, until we're at Worlds, we won't know 100%. But from what I can see, there's definitely a lot of there's still a lot of Lance, there's still a lot of Celeste, but there are some other picks that are kind of coming back into the meta that I think we'll see. Like Gwen will have a niche area.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of these frontline melee heroes that we have, Rhyme actually starts fitting back into it again as well.
Oh,
so
right.
wherever you buff one thing and you start seeing changes, there's other heroes that are just been waiting to be back in the meta, waiting for their kind of time to shine.
Like,
So
don't forget me. I'm here. Pick me. Pick me.
no, it's true. I mean, people still are picking up things like Glaive and Lance combos, or you see like a double melee, like Ozo. Like so, Ozo gets a huge buff, right? And let's say you pick the Lance up because you don't want to go against Lance's Ozo. Well, that you pick a Rhyme into Lance and Ozo together, and all of a sudden, like you're in a really good spot because he
Right.
does extremely well into Ozo. He does pretty good into Lance. He's not really good at killing Lance, but he's pretty good at not dying to him.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of meta changes that are even unrelated to these patch buffs and nerfs, just because that's just the way meta works.
Yeah, and the last thing, so I mentioned we talked about the Storm Crown briefly. There was no item tweaks or changes this time, but Storm Crown banner, I feel like they're going to hit this hard, and they knew about it going into 1.23 that the Taka Storm Crown banner build was pretty strong. It wasn't an insta win, but it was just becoming annoying. And now you're seeing Stormcrown banner on a lot of jungle carries, even some lane carries. Just kind of pick it up and maybe they sell it later for a better item. But this it's pretty strong.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the items. I think the item's pretty horrible. Just to be honest, I use it all the time, right? Because you kind of have to on certain picks, and then on other picks where you don't necessarily have to, it's still just really really good. Like I'm a big fan, for example, on Lance of building Stormcrown when you're in the carry position, but only you get the banner kind of early, right? So your jungle clear is literally faster than anyone. Like you can solo jungle clear super fast because you AoE attack everything with your Lance. The Stormguard banner like procs on these things. It procs on your Githian wall, like it procs on pretty much everything you do, and it procs on enemies with true damage. So technically, it's got like long-lasting affectation because you can't prioritize like defense against true damage. So it picks like that. It makes Taka actually clear the jungle extremely quickly, where normally he used to struggle to do jungle clears. And you can actually go Crystal Taka now, which was something people didn't do in the past because jungle clear on Crystal Taka was atrocious. You could never do it by yourself. But you're right. Like you even see some laners picking it up. You see, Black Feathers using it because their jungle clear traditionally has been pretty slow. So it speeds up certain heroes that had ailments and their clear times. But then that's kind of what the thing was always intended to be, right? Like, SCMC always talked about, like, this is to help, slower jungle clears or roams to be able to help to blah, 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 blah. But when you now come out of the jungle with a ton of health because you didn't lose any because you cleared so well, you're now dealing true damage early in mid game to heroes that can't buy defense against it. So you're getting free on top of damage to whatever you're doing already, whether it's weapon or, crystal. And it's just a very oppressive item. SCMC didn't want to attempt to change it before Worlds because I think they're too afraid of what happens if they make a major item mistake. And teams are already used to the item now. They understand it. So going into this very important patch, I don't think they wanted to tweak too many things with what might be considered, oh, this item's broken now, or like, what did you guys do? Now all these heroes don't work. I don't think they want teams having to change that much just a month before. But it should get changed after Worlds, and there needs to be a lot of item changes, I think. But hopefully, you know, in future patches, SCMC is working on that. Yeah, no, it should be a good time. I mean, first time we finally have all of these competitive teams in an environment together at the same time, so it can only mean good things. And you know, hopefully for the success of Vainglory and, you know, and SCMC and Twitch and all of their stuff, that it, you know, turns out to be as big as they hope.
Well, FooJee, thanks for coming on. This was fantastic. I want to let people know where they can find you before we get out of here. Are you still streaming?
Yeah, I'm still streaming. You can find me on mobcrush.com /FooJee, or you can you know, hit up my Twitter, which is @theFooJee. But yeah, still same old.
And then you can follow Shatter The Vain on Twitter @Shatter The Vain, a Facebook page /Shatter The Vain, usually posting images or other news stuff over there. And then I can't forget about the Patreon page, patreon.com/Shatter The Vain. And then all the episodes get posted on the website, shatterthevain.com. There's links to Stitcher, iTunes, the YouTube version as well. So be sure to subscribe. And if you're subscribing, throw me a review. I love seeing those as well. And that'll do it for episode 129. There were some issues with the video version if you're watching the video, so sorry about that. Audio was a little finicky, just technical difficulties this week, so sorry about any hiccups for anyone who had any trouble with this app.
Let's get this over with.